Baseball fans, BetMGM is giving you the chance to win a prize every day during the baseball season. Step into the batter's box for BetMGM Swing for the Fences free-to-play game. Pick any area of the strike zone and take your best swing. If you get a single, double, triple, or home run, you'll receive a prize. Smash a home run to collect a bonus bet on us. Just log into your BetMGM Sports account to get started. Then visit your promotions section to access the Swing for the Fences free-to-play game. You'll score a prize if you hit a single, double, triple, or home run. There's nothing more exciting than going yard, so swing for the fences with the king of sportsbooks. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. Existing customer offers. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards vary depending on market and expire 24 hours from issuance. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
To Alien Theorists Theorizing Case File 46. I'm Zell.
I'm Braden.
And we have a very special guest interview on Skype here tonight. Freddy Silva, famed crop circle researcher, author, director, all-around legend. Welcome to the show.
Now I've got something to live up to.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So before we got started, we got Freddy on, and right away we were getting into some interesting discussion. We had to stop it to start the case file. Freddy, you were telling us that pretty much since 2003, most crop circles have been man-made?
Yeah, in fact, it was quite funny in hindsight. My book, Secrets in the Fields, was published in 2002, coincidentally at the same time as the film Signs, and there was no connection between the two, which really helped the sales quite a bit. But a friend of mine made a very prophetic announcement, because I literally spilled the beans on the entire phenomenon, both man-made and a genuine thing. And I told people how to differentiate between the two and the science behind it. The problem is that once you let the cat out of the bag, he said, the hoaxing is going to get a lot better. And it did. And it's odd that since 2003, 99% of crop circles have been man-made, and they are getting better in terms of the way they look. But the thing is, they still can't replicate the real stuff. So it does tend to throw people off a little bit. But as I've always said, the crop circles were always a communication. They were a conversation between one world and ours. And like all conversations, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then we have to go away and think about it and process the whole thing. And that's what it was all about. And people sort of go to England, or they go to North America, where a handful of them still exists. In fact, the few genuine ones that exist in North America tend to happen around Ohio and around the Serpent Mouth, is kind of interesting. But the thing is, we kind of knew about this years and years and years ago, and people sort of travel a long way to go and experience these things, and they kind of let down when they hear this piece of information. And I have two answers for them. And one is, if you want to really follow the truth behind the crop circles and get into the real spirit of what they are about and what they are doing to you and for you, it's good to know the truth, which has been well researched. And two, sometimes you can go into a field and go into a man-made design, which is very likely nowadays, but you still be picking up the energy of what was there before years ago. And that's the beauty of the real thing, is that they are, what you're seeing is like the slice of an orange. You're experiencing visually an extraordinary phenomenon, but it's actually what's behind the visual, what creates it, that's important, and it's to do with energy. So the energy will be there for years afterwards. So sometimes the hoaxes are doing us a favor by putting down their creations in fields where there was already a genuine circle. And that's where you get, in what is called a very technical term, the tingly winglies. And that's a good thing.
Tingly winglies.
Perfect.
Highly technical, this program.
Hey, we do the same. Yeah.
That leads me to, like, I'd written down this question. I've been watching some of your lectures and stuff on YouTube. I was watching the Sounds of the Crop Circle. You did one in LA there. And I was actually, one of the questions I had is, do these you mentioned in there sometime that there was this energy in there, and I was wondering, does it dissipate over time? Can you still feel it years and years after? So that was cool. Like, you answered one of my questions right off the hop. That's so you can go is it stronger when you're first there when it was fresh?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been in places where 16 packs of batteries suddenly evaporate of energy, and you're not even close to it yet. Geiger counters go off the scale, and then they basically just die. I've seen the BBC walk in to genuine crop circles and watch a very agonizing array of red warning lights on their equipment, and it doesn't work as soon as you cross their perimeter. Even helicopters flying over them at the right moment, usually within 24 hours of their appearance, their compasses start pointing south, the gyroscopes start behaving very weirdly, and a lot of people don't want to fly over them for that reason, as a matter of safety. Luckily, no one's ever been hurt. But the same, they are very energetic in terms of a fingerprint. And it's interesting because that fingerprint will last as much as 5 years. And it really depends on how many people visit the actual formation. If it's not very well visited, the energy can last a bit longer. So it's as if people go in, they act like blotting paper, they soak up a little bit of the energy, and which is why people talk about, seeing things with their peripheral vision, or they have extended dream states. Some people have been spontaneously healed, and these were skeptics to begin with, so they weren't making this stuff up. So yes, there is a very important energy, and the genuine crop circles have that, and the man-made ones don't. But here's the rub, because there was a time when there were certain designs, and specifically in England, where, and again, to point out, the crop hasn't been damaged at all in the real crop circles. If you and I would go out and make one, you'd crush the plants, because you have to use a heavy piece of equipment with which to take down the plants. The real things aren't damaged at all. And there was a few, about 3 or 4 of them, which showed a serious degradation in the style of the plants. And it kind of had me puzzled, and had a few physicists puzzled as well. And we were able to measure some energy, which literally an hour later had gone. And there was a guy there who was very familiar with microwave energy, and he said, microwave energy of a certain frequency that's very fleeting. It doesn't stick around, and it's also doesn't seem to be defined to any particular area, unlike the real crop circles. And we finally recognized that someone had made these designs by hand, and they'd been irradiated as if from a beam from a satellite. And we began to theorize that there's someone in the military is actually trying to throw the research community off by irradiating crop circles with microwave, and then making us go on television and proclaiming all kinds of wonderful things, when in fact they can then pull the rug from under us. So luckily, we do happen to have the right people with the right expertise at the right time to prevent this happening. So it's a bit of a game sometimes, but it is worth sort of following through the research properly, because it means that you can call a spade, and if it's not a spade, well, it's something else. It's a duck. And if it's not a duck or a spade, then you have to say, I don't know. And the great thing about the research in this subject is to be honest about it.
Okay, wait. So there's man-made crop circles. That's, everyone knows that. Everyone's seen the guys with the plank and boards, and so it crushes the stalk, right, as you were saying. And then the natural ones, they're like fused sideways above like one of the nodal points, right, on the actual plant itself.
They're bent about 2 inches above the soil, and I've been very fortunate on many occasions to be the first person on the site where you're looking at the plants. The head of the plants aren't even touching the ground. They're literally hovering over the ground, which means that in order to do my work, I have to actually crush the plants. So the amount of times I've taken my boots off and just walked barefoot as a sign of respect, but still, it's almost sacrilege when you walk in, and your heart really sinks when you recognize that you're about to damage something that's so beautiful, that's been done with a certain type of energy that leaves no impression on the plants. It literally makes them fall over at 90 degrees, it kind of rehardens the stems as though they were made very molten like glass, and then they reharden in their horizontal position. But when you look at on the ground, they flow like a river. I mean, they use nature's own spiraling motion of energy. So it kind of shows that whatever and whoever's behind this has complete control over the laws of nature and does so with full respect of the plants. So it's quite a beautiful sight to see.
Okay, now that you said that they have respect for nature, I was going to ask, after a while, do the real crop circles, do they regrow? Do they re-stand up?
Oh, they do. If you leave them alone, they come up in the most extraordinary fashion. There were, in the early days where few people used to go into the fields, you'd see these photographs that show that after, say 10 days, the barley or the wheat would start growing back up. But it would do so in really, really weird forms. So let's say you have a circle, okay? And they're not perfectly circular. They're slightly elliptical, by the way. Just like nature doesn't always make perfect circles. And it turns out that when the plants rise, they do so in an extraordinary way. So imagine that a plant standing up in its usual way has these nodes, what we call like the plant's knuckles, like you have knuckles on your fingers that allows them to bend. Well, the plants, when they come back up and they haven't been damaged, they are somehow programmed to come up in different sections. So the first section, let's say a foot wide of plants, has been told to come back up on the first node. The next section has been told to rise in the second node, and so on. So when you actually look at it slightly from above, it looks like this undulating field of up and down and up and down. And it looks, and from the air, it resembles like the spokes on the wheel of a bicycle. So nature doesn't do that. This can only be done. Plants can only be told to do that if they've been artificially told to do so. It's quite an extraordinary thing.
Wow.
And the best thing is, the following year, when the farmers, and in fact, the farmers were the first ones to point this out. They said that, after they've gone for the usual sarcasm when you first see them and the negativity, because all they hear about on television is, two guys made all the world's crop circles. Sometimes they made the same crop circle in 3 countries in the same evening, by the way.
Right.
The stories just don't add up. But after you get to know them, they'll say, it's interesting. The following year, I'll plant the field, and the crop that is now, it's disappeared. The field has been plowed. They've reseeded the entire field, and they said that it's the most magical thing where the area that's been reseeded, where the crop circle used to be, is now growing in the inverse. So in other words, the plants within the original affected area are now growing faster and taller than the plants around them. So it has a fertilizing quality to it. So that's why a lot of the farmers that we talk to are really interested in finding out what we're finding out, because they find that there's a benefit, a health benefit to the actual plants.
The natural form of GMO.
It's a real natural form of GMO.
Real natural.
In fact, I'll tell you a really funny story as a side thing. A couple of times, because, in Europe, GMO is not allowed. The European Parliament has banned GMO crops.
Right.
Well, during the Blair administration in England, or the Blair administration in England, as we call them, he surreptitiously allowed Monsanto to go and use a test field somewhere in East Anglia. And it turns out that I don't know how they found out, but Greenpeace found out about this. So in the middle of the night, they snuck into the farmer's field, and they actually made a crop circle in the shape of a biohazard sign, and then reported to the media. The media went out and said, hey, aliens have landed. And then they dug deeper to the story and found that the farmer had been planting GMO crop, and that's how he was nailed. And that happened in France as well. So well done, Greenpeace, and hoaxing.
Yeah.
Right on.
So it's well planned, well thought out hoax to do that.
Okay, Freddy, we got right into it real quick. Let's go back. We kind of wanted to ask you, what got you started down this road of crop circles and the real natural phenomenon of crop circles? What was there one central event that got you started?
Yeah, I'd actually moved to America at the time. I was actually living in Chicago. I was working in advertising. I was a creative director, a writer, and an art director. A million miles away from the subject, but I'd always been interested in the mysteries, secrets, and the Earth mysteries. And I was watching television with the sound turned off one evening, and I just knew exactly what I was looking at. It's like something just turned inside me when I was looking at this image of this, what looked like an alien sign in the middle of a wheat field in the middle of nowhere. And I thought, I know exactly what that is. And I kind of traced the fall of my career to that point. And I spent more and more time going backwards and forwards to England to do research, and eventually, wrote this book I had no intention of writing, because so much of the evidence was pointing in the other direction of what we're being told. I mean, the first thing was that we found out that these two idiots called Doug and Dave, they'd actually been paid by the British Secret Service using taxpayers' money. Now, if the whole thing was hoaxed, then why would you pay two guys to tell the world that they made all the world's crop circles? And like I said, sometimes 3 designs in several countries in the same evening, which makes me wonder, why shouldn't we be analyzing Doug and Dave instead? Because if humans can be in 3 different countries at the same time, wow, I'd like to be able to do that. It'll save me so much on those horrible flights that you have to take these days, being cramped in an airplane seat. You can just be anywhere. And that's what got me interested. It was the fact that there was a big lie, and there was also a big benefit to humanity, because people were talking about spiritual awakenings and healings, and there were scientists describing how they've taken these designs and built them in their garages, and they got these machines that actually defy gravity. And we'd known that from channeled material from a woman who picked up the story from the crop circles before the crop circles even appeared in England. So that's why it got so strange that I figured there's this huge story here that humanity has to know.
Hell yeah, that's fucking cool.
That's
pretty much what we're doing, but we never took it any farther except this podcast. Not yet, at least.
We're just starting to fall down the rabbit holes.
It's a very, very deep rabbit hole, and it gets more and more curiouser and curiouser and curiouser.
Yeah, that's what we find. The more we read, they're like, oh, come on, this is insane. Okay, one thing I want to ask you, you said about those 2 hoaxers. You see pictures of the ones that they claim they've hoaxed, and they're like, they pale in comparison to some of these that are supposedly alien or not. They're not done with the board and plank. Let's start with that. So
yeah, exactly. And the farmers who actually saw them making them live for the camera said the same thing. I said, that's not, and I quote, that's not like the ones we've had before. And usually in the old episodes of the news items, what you get to see is Doug and Dave out there with a board and a little ludicrous contraption that of this sort of bent wire that they hooked to a baseball cap that helped them align straight lines by focusing on a tree in the horizon. Well, there's no way you can do that. You'd have to have the foresight and the backside to create a perfectly straight line. You'd have to have your head rigidly set in cement for that to happen. So it was ridiculous. But the funny thing is, and being in advertising, I immediately saw this because you'd see them making the crop circle, and then the news item would cut to a real aerial crop circle. A crop circle shot from the air that was real, that I knew was real. So it would be the equivalent of you and I going out in the middle of New York City with a trowel and some bricks and some cement, and we'd lay a few courses of bricks, and then you cut to the Empire State Building. Yeah. And people would believe, hey, these two just built the Empire State Building over lunch. That's a very clever old advertising trick, which
and they built 2 more in different countries.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that can debunk all of these circles. Just a couple of guys on TV. Technique. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a very simple technique. Basically, if you can try and just turn off a section of the population and then get them to fight each other, that means that the government has done its work for you. I mean, all you have to do is look at the current political situation in America. It's the same concept. It was actually it was used by the Nazis, and God knows who came up with this stuff. But they were masters at doing this. You set people against each other and you divide and conquer.
Yeah.
we do the work for ourselves by basically fighting each other, while the guilty get on with the work behind our back. It's a very simple, corny technique, and it really works.
Yeah, you fit religion versus religion, race versus race, belief versus belief, political party versus party, and then the infighting starts, and then everything else is kind of just lost in the wash, pretty much.
Absolutely, which is why it's worthwhile, being selective and paying attention to people to actually do the real work and saying, okay, you don't have to believe everything I'm saying, but you know what, this guy at least has done his homework and he's being honest about it. I could be sitting here saying, go out and buy my book because everything is genuine, but that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm actually bad for business when I say, well, a lot of crop circles are man-made, but that's not going to sell me a lot of books. But at the same time, that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to tell the truth and to open people up to a bigger reality. And once you get there, my God, your life is going to improve so much, because then you'll see through everything in life.
Yeah, so you have an honest interest in what you're doing. And
absolutely.
And
money comes in later.
Yeah, we're all for it. If you got an honest interest and you want to do it full time, unfortunately we live in a world where you have to make a little bit of money and you write a book and people should buy it. Definitely.
Exactly. In fact, I've always joked as well that you can always tell a good researcher by the amount of arrows on their back.
Exactly.
So with you, we talked about a little bit about the government hiring people and irradiating fields possibly to discredit. Do you have any? What's your thoughts on that? Why are they doing that?
Well, it was quite funny because early on in the research, there was a very clever reporter who managed to infiltrate one of the hoaxer gangs, and they didn't realize who he was, and he had a concealed microphone, and he was able to record. And looking back on this situation, it was actually very foolish of them to open up that quickly. They said that the governments around the world are actually really worried about the fact that we're being invaded by aliens, but that's actually not the case. If they really wanted to come all the way to invade us, they would have done it by now. Yeah. These things are works of art. I mean, they're made by obviously a source that's very non-malicious, but they are very concerned because these beings, let's call them beings for now,
sure.
They haven't contacted the British government, the American government, the German government, and incredibly of all, the Vatican. And that's who the hoaxers said were really at the center of the hoaxing, because they're hoping that whoever's behind this is going to contact them. They have no control over the crop circles. They can't just put a sign in a field by the government and saying, please don't make crop circles on this field. And if they have no control over this, then they can't answer questions from the public. And if the public is seen not to believe in the government, then the government hasn't got a bona fide reason to govern. That's how their thinking is. And it's totally plausible. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to lose their credibility. But at the same time, they're having to lie in order to maintain the credibility, which is a bit of a hypocrisy. But that's human nature. It's just the way it is. So it's a very simple answer to the question, actually.
Mm-hmm. Man, yeah, governments, they always trying to keep control over the people. Yeah.
I mean, they honestly think that they do have the public's best interest at stake. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. You'd have to be in government. I think some people do. I think some people use government as a mask to do really nefarious things. But at the same time, they do believe that they have everybody's best interest at stake. And if they haven't got an answer to a supernatural phenomenon, then their credibility is blown. It's very silly when you think about it.
Yeah, it's like that's not the scientific way, right? If you see this phenomenon, you should do everything in your power to try and understand what it is. Not necessarily jump straight to aliens or straight to something else, but just start at the bottom. All right, what is this? How's it happening? Why is it happening? But instead, it's just not discredit.
Exactly. Actually, if it was Eric von Daniken on the show, I think he'd immediately jump to aliens.
Well, we usually do that, but we start slow and then we jump to aliens by the end usually.
It depends on how you define alien, let me put it that way.
Okay. How would you define alien? Let's start there.
I define alien as both physical and non-physical entity. Anything that's not outside, everything that's outside of our paradigm. And yes, there have been people over the world who have seen UFOs before and after crop circles. in the vicinity of them, but there's no shred of evidence to show that they actually make them.
Right.
In fact, the evidence seems to point that there's a non-physical entity at work here. And for this, you're going to have to take a little bit of a leap of faith, because one of the people for whom I really wrote the book, because she's a good friend of mine, or she became a good friend of mine, she's a highly respected trance medium in England that even the police use to solve their most heinous crimes. And she has a near 100% record.
Crazy.
And as a trance medium, she inadvertently vectored information from this universal consciousness, calling themselves the Watchers. And they said that they're very concerned about what's happening here on Earth, and that they can't intervene directly, so they can only suggest things that would help us move along. And they said that they would show signs of their existence 7 days from now at the Hill of Light. And we thought, what the hell is this about? And we thought, well, wait a minute, the Hill of Light is the Europe's tallest man-made mound, which is called Silbury Hill in the centre of Wiltshire, not far from Stonehenge. And sure enough, 7 days later, the first of the new generation of crop circles suddenly appeared at the base. And that's when we realized, oh my God, there's some kind of consciousness that's communicating with us for reasons that we don't know yet, that is suddenly talking to us, and they're going to start giving us a huge amount of information. It's going to really turn the world on its head. So much of what I wrote in terms of the science in the book really went back to validating a lot of her material, and it all turned out to be absolutely correct. And that's what makes it such an interesting story. And but they were saying, when I was trying to figure out who are these people, they were basically saying that they're very physical on their level of reality. You just have to understand reality as being formed of various degrees of frequencies. So let's start, for example, that the whole universe is made of a big radio station. And we, at the physical world, are down at 88 FM. Very physical. You can touch things. You can hit walls. It hurts. It's a physical world. But there are a multitude of universes and a multitude of people living in these universes, and they're all living at different frequencies. Case in point, I mean, we can only see so much of the light spectrum, and we can only hear so much of the hearing spectrum, whereas porpoises, dolphins, whales, elephants, they can hear and see far beyond us. So obviously, we are very limited in our scope in what we can perceive, and that's how they're explaining it. At 90 FM, there's a whole new universe of people out there. We see them as light sometimes, as light phenomena, and we go, wow, what are those balls of light floating around the field? Well, that's them. They can't physicalize to our level. They can only show themselves at a point where we can barely perceive them, which is the light spectrum. And they said that where they are is so far along the radio dial that we don't even have numbers to interpret it. And they said, just forget about it. But sometimes, during some momentous times in human history, they have materialized into physical forms. And they said that we take on very unusual forms. We develop long heads, like in the Egyptian long heads and the Peruvian long heads. And we also are very, very tall because our frequency does not allow us to live in the human realm for very long or easily. So because in nature, all form follows function, we had to develop biological bodies which would allow us to live in certain comfort. So if you look back at, for example, Egyptian history, going back to the time of Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, and before them, yes, there was a lineage of people called the Watchers, or the Shining Ones, the people of the light, who went all the way back to 8000 BC, and they're all documented in the Egyptian history record. And in fact, they said that because they ran out of people with which to mate from their particular kind, they had to mate with humans, and that's where the problems began. And there is an actual record in the Egyptian temples that clearly states that the first pharaoh, and I quote, of a purely human bloodline begins in 3100 BC, and that's an established record. So these beings who are very concerned about our well-being, we can call them guardian angels if you're a Christian, they basically are trying to remind us that we're part of a bigger universe, and they're giving us some very helpful information disguised in beautiful symbols.
That was extremely well put. Fuck yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. No. So on that topic now, so a lot of these crop circles, they show like signs of sacred geometry, like really crazy, like showing the relationship of phi and like all these like crazy golden ratio and stuff. So is that like some type of their way of trying to like send messages to us?
Yeah, and any mathematician would understand that because, if we try to communicate between cultures, language is always a problem. And yet, if you use mathematics or geometry, that's the actual connection or language that nature uses to communicate with itself. So if you're coming here from another civilization, planet, or universe, you'd use mathematics as a form of communication. So that's why so many of the crop circles are mathematically bent. The way that the crop circles begin is a perfect natural spiral that is only found in nature. I've seen people make crop circles, and they cannot even begin to approximate the spiral. It requires a ratio of 1 to 1.614 and so on. Very hard to achieve. There are new mathematical theorems which we have discovered for the first time in 2,300 years, which are embedded in some of the crop circles. So our understanding of mathematics is now being taken forward a little bit. There are advanced hyperdimensional physics involved in some of the designs, which has helped people build some very unusual devices, which are anti-gravity devices. And one of them is here in America, one is in England, one is in Australia. And with a little bit of electrical assistance to get them going, they do levitate. And they're just waiting for the right political expedient moment to reveal this to the public. Because right now, not a good time. So there is a lot of mathematics involved, which shows that we're talking with a group consciousness that obviously understands the rules of nature, how to bend them, and then applies them in a way that we can understand in the circles that some clever person can then decipher, then show us that we're dealing with an intelligent source. And that's how the conversation then developed. That's how we went from simple circles to pictograms to really highly complex shapes. We were being, literally given a new lesson each season. And as we learned the lesson, so the crop circles developed. And that's how you get to the really complex stuff by the time you get to 1999.
Oh, that was actually sorry, Braden, go ahead.
What I was going to ask is, going into that and possibly beings trying to give us these messages and these designs, do you think now that we kind of talked about the energy of these locations, is the energy in the actual location, or is the energy, do you think, maybe derived from the design?
It's both. The way I finally worked it out, and I was able to prove this by some very strange coincidences, because I had to learn everything from scratch. I mean, I'm not a physicist. I have to learn physics from scratch. I have to connect all the dots and talk to the right people. And it turns out that what's happening is that the design really emanates from space. We now know that thought is actually an electromagnetic form. So when you and I have a thought that is directed in a very focused way, you can actually influence the algorithms on a computer. They've done this at Princeton University, and they've been able to prove this. And this is Princeton, for Christ's sakes. It's not just some garage sort of driven experiment. These are real hard-nosed scientists trying to blur the gap between science and mysticism, and they're doing a very good job at it. So if you take that basic concept, that if you send a packet of thought through space, that energy basically is unseen in the vacuum of space. But as it starts to hit the atmosphere, which is much denser, it starts to break down the frequency. And the first thing that you will see is a beam of light before a crop circle is made. And there are at least 60 eyewitnesses around the world that actually say this, including policemen, by the way. And they'll say that there's a beam that comes out of the sky, and it rotates to the point where if it's raining, you can see the rain bouncing off it. It will last for about 15 seconds, regardless of the size of the crop circle. They hear a sound associated with it, and the thing manifests in less than 15 seconds. Well, there's a good theory behind this, because we know that if you slow down a particle beam to, let's say, 40 octaves, let's say it's about 40 octaves above the human hearing range. So we're now talking electromagnetism here. At that point, you're creating light. But if you slow that down 40 octaves, that beam of light, you can actually hear the actual note. And when that note, as a frequency, hits something physical like plants or water or powder, it creates a beautiful geometric shape. And there are libraries around the world that clearly show the interaction between energy and physical mediums. And you can see the photographs that have been taken that clearly show the impact of a sonic form on a physical surface that reveals the exact forms as the crop circles. And that's how we realized that's how they were doing it. They were using a form of sound, light, and of course, with the plants also doing unusual things, they were also bending the geomagnetic field at that location. So the thought itself is an energy form. Now, here's the second part. The second part is that energy is not just flat. I mean, that we're only seeing the slice of the orange in a crop circle. The energy goes above the ground like a big dome, because we know this, because it interferes with helicopters that fly over the crop circles. But it also goes underneath the ground, because we've made magnetometer surveys of the crop circles and found that the energy descends into the earth too. So these things are three-dimensional. Now, here's the third part of this. Where the crop circles appear, and I'm talking about the real ones now, not the other stuff, where they appear, they always appear at the crossing points of the Earth's geomagnetic lines of energy, what they call the telluric currents. The thing is that all of these currents also happen to go to the adjacent ancient temples. So all the ancient temples on the face of the earth are also built exactly on the same crossing lines of energy. So this energy is going around the earth. It's energizing the old sacred sites, and it's doing all kinds of unusual things to the planet. So no wonder people are beginning to react to these things. And, you know, whether positively or negatively, that's up to everybody. It depends on what kind of music your crop circle is. I mean, to some people, crop circles are, you know, it's like the best music they've ever heard. But to those people that don't believe in this and they want to drag their feet and they don't want to develop, they're going to basically make sure that you fail at what you're doing. And that's why we get so much antagonism in these subjects. Some people just don't want to believe this, and some do. But that's how it happens, basically. It's a form of energy imprinting itself on the face of the earth, and it's impacting every living organism.
Okay, I got a couple of things to say on that, because that just like blew my mind. So on the form of like a physical representation of sound waves, it's called, like when I first came across it was called semantics. Is where, like, if you put like
semantics.
Yeah, semantics. Yeah, if you sprinkle salt on a metal plate and then vibrate a certain frequency through it, it'll take a form depending on the frequency. The higher the frequency, the more elaborate the pattern.
That's exactly how we figured it out. Yeah,
and a lot of those patterns, like you look at some of the crop circles, like, oh, that looks like a 440 hertz or a 432, or like they represent like a certain frequency range of sound,
which we were able to actually record, and using highly sensitive electrostatic meters, you could actually figure out the actual frequency. In fact, a friend of mine who designed one such device, we'd walk together in the field along the tractor lines, so we wouldn't damage any of the upright crop. And I would be dowsing. I mean, I tend to look at energy in a much more subtle way. I don't need mechanisms to tell me that there's energy there. And he would be getting exactly the same hit on his meter, but whereas I would get a certain hit in my copper rods, he would get a frequency reading on his machine. And every time I'd get a major reading, he would get a major hit on his machine. Whenever I get a lower reading, he'd get a drop. So we're able to actually validate this very ancient technique with a brand new modern piece of equipment. And when we did the map of these crop circles, it turns out that they actually start off as being, you're walking along the field and you probably be picking up about 150 megahertz as a background frequency. There's a lot of static out there these days. The moment you hit the wall of a real crop circle, the frequency can shoot up as much as 220 megahertz. That's quite a big jump. And then it goes down a bit, up a bit, down a bit, but always increasing as you get towards the center. So it's like a shock wave. The actual design, like you said, it's like cymatics. It's like the repercussions of a shock wave that's hit the plants. So again, very elegant, very beautiful way of doing it.
So now you got these semantics, and you have like these special designs in the crop circles, and then you go around to a lot of these ancient sites around the world, and they have like a lot like the flower of life and like these complex like geometrical patterns. So there's got to be some type of relation between like sacred sites, crop circles, and sacred geometry. Am I correct?
Well, here's the interesting thing. That's what we got so excited about this, and why I ended up sort of writing other books on related subjects, because I suddenly realized, well, wait a minute. Wherever the crop circles appear in the world, even in the Canadian prairies, where there used to be large Native American mounds where no one's buried, I mean, the mounds are just marking the energy lines. That's what they do.
Right.
It turns out that there was a relationship. I'm going, wait a minute, they're trying to point something out about our ancient history. What is it about the ancient sacred sites that they're trying to get us to look at? Well, now that I've analyzed sacred sites, it turns out that they literally are one and the same thing. For example, let's take a pyramid, because it's such a easily to understand shape. The Great Pyramid of Giza, once you take all the stones away, it's just one big energy vortex. You can measure this on equipment. You can do all kinds of experiments with it, but essentially it's marking a big geomagnetic hotspot. There's a certain type of stone that's used to harness that energy to make sure it doesn't go away. It then amplifies it on the inside so that you're actually susceptible to a much rarefied frequency in the inside than you are on the outside. And what we found is that the frequencies that are created inside those ancient temples just happen to coincide with the frequency that alters your brainwave patterns. In other words, you have two hemispheres of your brain. One is used for measuring things and for rationalizing, so it's your left brain. And your right brain is your intuitive, which is where all the fun stuff exists. And it turns out that the frequencies that are present in these sacred sites are exactly the range that is needed to switch you from left brain to right brain. In other words, they don't want you to think about the stuff. They want you to feel the stuff. And once you get to that point, it's like doing mushrooms without the side effects. You literally are having out-of-body experiences, and people are getting healed as a result of this. And the same thing was happening in crop circles, and that's what the connection was. Because ultimately, the sacred sites were built to help you have an expanded state of consciousness. And once you have that, and you're more aware of the bigger picture of what's going on, then you know who you are, where you've come from, what your purpose is here, and what the big scheme of thing is. In other words, you have complete control over yourself, and that's the one thing that religion would not allow you to do, nor any government, and that is very dangerous. So no wonder, it goes back to our earlier question, why is there so much debunking? Well, there's your answer right there. People don't want you to wake up to the bigger picture. They want to keep you under control. It's a very cliched subject, I know, but unfortunately, that is the truth.
I actually got a little bit of shivers. Like a whole bunch of stuff in my mind just clicked into fruition there, because you hear about
going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, you hear about these ancient sites, and you hear like they were like temples for altering your mind, and you're like, oh, you hear that, but you never actually make the connection. But what you just said there made a huge connection for me.
And there's science behind it now as well. I mean, I've in my second book, The Divine Blueprint, I went really deep into that. And again, Princeton did experiments with this as well. They actually developed a machine that can actually measure the influence of consciousness with and without sacred space, or even in normal parking lots. I mean, they've had to do their scientific experiments. I remember a very famous case where they went to a Native American sacred site in Wyoming, and they measured people's consciousness at the site, and the machine was going off the scale. They tried the same meditational group in a Walmart car park, and nothing happened, of course. All you could measure was the people doing the meditation, but the site had no influence on them. And then they went off to Egypt, and they went off and tried the machine in different sites, and they found that just the temples by themselves were registering frequencies as high as a large meditating group of people. But when you put the meditating group of people together with a temple, the readings way off the scale. So now you have real science able to measure what people 15,000 years ago were trying to tell us, that these buildings were built to make you into a god, or remind you that you are a god. And that you're not just flesh and bone, that you're much more than some of your parts, and they don't let them tell you otherwise. And we've forgotten that over time. So now the crop circles are doing exactly the same thing to remind you of this connection. Again, a very New Age concept, very Buddhist concept, but very true at the same time.
It makes a lot of sense that, especially like the Catholic religion, like a means of control, would try to annihilate all these ancient sites and ancient teachings, because they knew that was the case, right? Eliminate your right brain. Keep them left brain so they don't really think for themselves or no intuition. Keep them paying their tithe, staying true to the church, feeding the machine. And now, like we're starting to realize like that's what it is, and it's like all this like coming together. And now I got one more question for you, because you hear about like a lot of the theories of the ancient Maya and their like long count calendar in 2012. A lot of people said it was all the end of the world, but a lot of people also say it's like the start of a new dawn of like human consciousness.
Absolutely.
Do you go into that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I was asked by a major magazine to write an article about the end of the world. And I said, well, I don't really do that kind of thing. But you know what? I'd like to research it. I want to have some fun. And you know what? There have been 13 end of the world scenarios since the time of Christ. And the only people that ever benefit from any of them have been the Catholic Church. So it's a bit of a funny article. But at the same time, I actually wanted to find out what is the big mystery about the Mayan calendar. Because any elder in Central America, if not in any culture around the world, will tell you there is no such thing as linear time. Everything happens in cycles. In fact, the Japanese talk about, going in the round. You have to think in the round. And what comes around comes around. So the Mayan calendar essentially to them was, well, you know what? It's another cycle within another cycle within another cycle. It's like your Volkswagen engine. It gets to 9,999, and then it turns over to zero, but the car's still running. And I thought, you know what? That's a very good analogy. And it turns out that the original stela on which this calendar was written, which, by the way, is not mine at all. The Olmec inherited that calendar from someone else, even older than them.
Right.
So we're talking about something that went back thousands of years. And the Mayas said that, this German professor found the stela in a small temple not far from Teotihuacan, up in the hills. Not many people know about it. And I read his report. He was really keen into this. He was onto something, and he was saying, well, this is interesting because they're thinking about this return. They're trying to prime the owner of the land for the return of the spirit god to come back in 5,000 years, and he is to prepare the land for the return of the close of the end of the era. And the end of the stela is actually missing. It's broken off. Now, he was a bit of a manic depressive, and he kind of took this as being maybe a warning. And then he dies. Well, his laboratory assistant takes over the research, and he was actually bipolar. So he began to look at his notes, and he completely misinterpreted what the original scientist had read. And he took this to be a real omen that the world really was going to end. So, and then again, he passes away, and then someone else picked it up. I can't remember whom. And they basically realized, oh, my God, we can actually have to warn people that the end of the world is coming in 2012, and we should do something about it and prepare ourselves spiritually. And then a whole movement of people cashing in on it. Well, you know what happened, basically. It became a huge goldmine of money for people.
It was a big cult hit,
The whole thing went totally out of control, and I was just laughing when I was writing this because I thought, my God, it's like Monty Python couldn't have written a better script, where from a small error in the reinterpretation of someone's original work, this error manifests into something and into a huge catastrophe. But here's the upside of it. The thing is with the cycles is that they were always never meant to happen exactly on the dates because in nature, in the cosmos, everything is very fluid. So the end of the cycle is just a synchronization with heavenly forces. What happens is during these cycles, there are big changes that happen, and usually they're not very good. If we look back at history, there's usually a meteorite that hits the Earth, a big flood, some solar flare. Most of humanity gets wiped out, but you know what? People survive. We start again. We rebuild again, and this window of opportunity exists within about 40 years either side of the date to allow us as a human consciousness, as a collective, to get our act together. And if we can get our act together and recognize that we have more power than we can possibly understand, to quote the line from Star Wars, and there's a lot of good stuff in that film, by the way, they basically said that if we can basically muster our collective will to work together, we can actually not only postpone the coming end of the world, but we can also maybe deflect a large meteorite that NASA now believes has a very good chance of hitting the Earth sometime around 2034, which just happens to coincide with the date in one crop circle that appeared 30 years ago that actually shows the Earth missing from the solar system. So there is a warning to all of this, and there is a way that we can actually overcome it or even prepare for the worst. In fact, we may even, if we get our act together, and believe me, there's more people thinking good things about the world right now than you want to believe. It's just that the media doesn't want to show good news, you see. So there's more people thinking the way we do, trying to come up with a way that we can all work together. And if we just get our act together before then, we may just be able to divert this asteroid and basically avoid a huge catastrophe. So that's what the end of the world really is. It's just passing from one age to the next. But it's a very fluid thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It can be something that ultimately would be for our greatest good.
Right. Well, do you know the name of that asteroid? I remember reading about it, but I can't remember the name of what they call it.
I think it's called Apophis.
Apophis. It's Apophis. That's right.
I think it's named after the Egyptian god, which is the big writhing serpent, which is always taken to be a bad omen. But you know what the Egyptians said? Well, the serpent really is just the energy of the universe. It's here on Earth. These lines of energy are the same ones where the crop circles grow to, where the sacred sites are built on. And you know what? It's just like the arteries in your body, except that on the Earth, they actually do move. They behave like serpents. They're not good or bad. You just have to know how to harness them. And the Chinese always said that about the dragon lines. You have to work with the dragon energy. You don't have to be afraid of it or kill it. You just have to work with it. You have to use the flow, you know, or it was so well said in a movie, you have to use the force.
Use the force. Man, we love Star Wars.
Starting to sound
there's
like
so
the in the
much
Fifth
good
Element.
information about that film. I think Lucas was actually channeling, and I don't think he's given himself enough credit for what he wrote.
Man, we just went on the biggest tangent about ancient cultures and stuff. It fucking fit right in. It was perfect.
Yeah, it was unreal.
Man, I got shivers.
Okay, let's bring it back to crops. I had a couple of questions fans had written in that wanted us to ask. What was the best? Was there a best year for crop circles?
It kind of depends on how you define best. I mean, for me, it was around 1996, 97 when I was making some huge discoveries. I guess because I was ticking all the right boxes and the answers were coming up in the field to prove that I was going on the right path of inquiry. It was like a wonderful relationship that was happening with this invisible consciousness. And I still love the day that I was doing it because I felt very guided by this. There was magic happening all the time. And we were getting some beautiful designs which were stretching our imagination and really pushed us to the extreme. But I would say anything in the early years, even from the simple circles, which are beautiful to look at in their simplicity from the early 80s, all the way through to to about 1999. And then the whole thing starts degrading with, there's more hoaxing starts to come on board and stuff. But those were definitely the golden years. But having said that, I mean, the crop circles have been around quite a long time. I mean, there's the Native American cultures recognize them. They said that they come here sporadically over the millennia. It's the signs of the Star People, and the Star People are very real. They come over for tea to the Lakota people virtually every other week. In fact, if you talk to the Lakota about the Star People, they almost roll their eyes. It's like, oh God, more white people that want to talk about Star People. I can't believe they don't believe this stuff yet. They're almost disparaging. They can't believe we're so backward.
Yeah.
So it's actually quite an old phenomenon. But if I was going to put a golden era on it, I'd say, the middle 80s to the middle 90s when all the real hard research was really being done and we were making huge milestones in trying to understand what was going on and why we were being communicated.
What about what do you think, in your opinion, what's the best crop circle you've ever seen? What's the most beautiful?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Is there one that stands out in your mind where, like, when you think about it, it comes to your forefront to your mind?
Oh, there's two. One for personal reasons and a second one for collective reasons. The first one, I had just sort of put together how they were all being made. I couldn't seem to tie them together. And then I went and actually laid down in one evening, and I was actually levitated and taken out of body. And after that experience, and I can tell you, I've never forgotten that, I basically began to write down so many notes that I thought I was going mad. And like I said, I did not want to write the book. This is something that was dumped upon me. And looking back on it to this day, I don't remember where half the stuff came from. So that was a very personal experience. And I had the bump on the back of my head to prove that I did hit the ground with quite a fun 45 minutes later. But the big one was the fact that once we realized what was going on, I'd conducted an experiment across the Atlantic with about 7 people. They came from different forms of life. There were psychics, there were healers, there were computer experts, there were mathematicians, lay people. And I told them, I said, and I didn't tell them I was conducting an experiment with other people. I just said, look, can you give me an idea where the big one is going to be this year? And this was in 1999. And I said, if you can, give me an idea what geometry would be used, and if you possibly can, a date. And you know what? Every one of these people got it within 3 days. They all came in around the same village in England, and England has a lot of villages, but they focus in on one of them, which no one's ever heard of, by the way, unless you live very close to it. And a lot of these people I've talked to are from Canada and America, so they certainly would have heard of a town called Devizes in Wiltshire. And they talked about 7-pointed geometry with a 9-pointed element. And I've kept these in an envelope, hidden from everybody. We got it down to within 24 hours to the point where we were going to actually stand on a hill looking down on this field, which is a very rare occurrence in that part of the world. All the fields are usually flat. So we'd have a perfect vantage point. You know, all the years of research, we're finally going to catch them at it. I booked my aeroplane 3 days in advance without telling the pilot where I was going to go, because that would invalidate the scientific experiment. And the evening that came around, we were all ready to go out. We're bundled with fleece blankets. There was alcohol because it gets very damp in the middle of the night in England. All kinds of other paraphernalia like night vision equipment, Russian military equipment, and God knows what else you can buy online. And so we're going to get them this time. And it's like someone just threw a pallet of sleeping gas into my living room. And next thing I remember, I woke up, it was 7 a.m, and everybody's flat out on the floor. And I'm thinking, oh, hell, we've blown it. What the hell has happened? I had a terrible headache. And I raced through my car, through the fog, went down to the airfield, and I gave the pilot the coordinates. He takes his helmet off and says, look, don't waste your money. It's really foggy this morning. We're not going to get a good photograph. And if this is the field that I think it is, I was the last pilot there at 9 o'clock at night. It was still bright in the middle of the summer at that time in England. And he said, no one can make a crop circle in that short space of time. Trust me, you don't want to do this. And I said, look, just put your helmet back on. Let's go out there. And so contrary, he basically took me around. We circled around the prescribed field, 500 feet above the surface. Went around once, twice, 3 times. It was still foggy. And then the 4th time, it's like a curtain just pulled, and this bloody great big fresh crop circle was right there. And all I can hear in my headphones was the pilot saying, fucking hell. How the hell did you know? I said, you don't want to know. And he became a believer. I mean, who wouldn't? And it was exactly where these 7 people said it would be. It was exactly a 7-pointed geometry. And yes, once we did got the diagram, there wasn't a 9-pointed element within it that you can't see. So talk about people realizing that they're much more psychic than they give themselves credit for. But that was a great experiment. And here's the best part of the story. When I got back to the house, there was a psychic there, another psychic, a friend of mine. I have a lot of friends psychics. And she said, I've just been told that you're not supposed to go in there. They said that this crop circle is really meant for the Earth. The Earth is being told to hold back on its shift because it's trying to give us time to get our act together. It's not really meant for us. And if we go anywhere near it, there'll be consequences. And I thought, yeah, but I have to document it. I have to show it. I have to talk about this because I'm a researcher. So I was given a technique to try and protect myself. And I tell you, I went in there. I lasted maybe a minute and a half before I went ill for like 48 hours. Talk about sticking your head in the microwave oven. My God. And the readings, the guy that went close to it, he said, I was a quarter of a mile away from this thing and all my equipment went dead and all the LCD equipment went black. The readings reached so high, the equipment just failed, and 16 packs of batteries, fresh batteries, went completely dead. That's how powerful this stuff was. but they were saying, this is not really meant for you. This is meant for the Earth. Please don't go near it because we'll make you sick if you do. We're just trying to protect you. So they do look after you, the circle makers. They really do.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
You can see why I gave up my day job.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it sounds unreal.
You know what? I don't know if there's... Do you know if there's ever been any in British Columbia, like West Coast Canada? Or is it just in the prairies?
There was one in Vanderhoof.
Yes, there was.
Yeah.
Yes, you're quite right. British Columbia tends to be the wrong geology. They like water, fresh water, and they like porous rock. And there's a lot of granite and volcanic rock in British Columbia. You'd have to go to the prairie side, Saskatchewan, Alberta. They still happen there. And in fact, they're the best farmers out there. They really are so keen to understand what's going on. And they've got the best eyewitness accounts of balls of light forming crop circles and beams of light. They love it. I mean, they are really into it. So bless them. They're Canadians. Of course they're going to be nice.
We're interested. We're all interested, definitely. Just wonder which one would shoot in my backyard because I can never get out there. It's too far.
Actually, people have asked that in the early years when we were sort of saying, is this thing conscious? And they go back home and there'll be a brand new crop circle just behind their house. It would follow you around like a little sort of stray puppy. It was very endearing.
Man, it's the coolest thing. It really is.
It's the best phenomenon happening in our lifetime. I just wish people would take more interest and stop believing the nonsense that they see on the internet and what they see on television, because it doesn't bear much resemblance to reality. So, it's got to be well researched, it's got to be well written, and it's got to be well thought through, and then you've got to use your discernment, just like anything else. Not everything can be what it is.
You know what I want to do? I want to take the biggest skeptic and the biggest debunker of crop circles and be like, all right, why do you think they're all fake? Why do you think they're all man-made? Blah blah blah. Give your spiel, and I want to take you and give your accounts. All right, listen, this is what we think these are the real crop circles, and I want to hear has there ever been a debate, a real televised or publicized debate between someone who's just no, these are all man-made, and then someone such as yourself?
Oh, absolutely. And they rarely get to be seen in the media. And most of the time, they basically start coming up with the most ridiculous stories to basically poo-poo what you're saying. The sarcasm is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the problem,
scientists. Right? Yeah, scientists who basically study a subject by avoiding the data and the evidence. That's not science. That's bullshit.
Yeah,
it happens in archaeology is full of this stuff. I mean, it's really quite horrific what we've been taught. So they'll throw the evidence out because they want to live in their wonderful little paradigm, and that's fine. But let us have our say as well, because we have the proof, and we'd like to believe that things are a little bit different to what we're told. So it's not a matter of disrespect, and usually how I approach it is in a very non-confrontational way. They'll poo-poo me and they'll laugh in my face, and I'll say, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And they'll go, I am? Yeah. I mean, but isn't it amazing, don't you think, that how those two guys were able to put a garden roller, which weighs a considerable amount of weight, and you go there and you expect the plants to be crushed and literally dug into the mud of the wet ground, and yet they're floating and hovering above the ground 2 inches and the stems aren't broken. How do you think they did that? And if you put it like that, they have to answer their own bullshit. And you should see how they basically start coming up with the most ridiculous methods. I mean, one guy actually said they probably used pillows to flatten the plant. That's why there's no damage. And you're a scientist?
Yeah.
So, and you basically put the evidence in front of them, and you let them explain their way out of their own quagmire. And they recognize after a while that they're digging themselves a huge hole and they can't get out of it. In other words, they begin to actually debunk themselves, and then they just walk out of the room embarrassed. I don't say anything. I let them process it for themselves, because that's the way you do it. You don't want to be confrontational.
Yeah.
You want to let them come to their own opinion using their own logic and using the evidence to back up their logic. And of course, once they recognize that it doesn't add up, they'll have to basically think things through for themselves and let them come to their own opinions. But usually they go away.
Yeah, it's really it's well put, because we've talked about a lot about ancient megalithic structures, and we talked to I don't know if you're familiar. You're probably familiar with Graham Hancock's work, right, about his ancient civilizations.
Oh God, we're all buddies. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's the same thing for those guys. They're like, okay, Egyptologists say it was Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. They built the pyramids. A little bit of graffiti says that's true, and that's what we're going to believe. And like they'll just believe that forever. And then when new evidence is presented, they're like, nah, can't be, just can't be.
Oh, it's ridiculous. In fact, Graham does it very well, and he has a lot of arrows on his back.
Yeah, he does.
And he's taking a lot of hits for us, which is fine with me because it means I can get on with my work. And even though he sells 100 million books, that's fine. No, I mean, it's a collaborative effort. I mean, in fact, we're having this conversation only last year at a conference, and he said, it's funny because there was one time when he was working on a specific project that I was working on, and we had no idea. And we reached the same conclusion independent of each other using different methods. And I thought, that's really cool, And he said, it's like we're kind of self-plagiarizing. And I said, well, we're not really. We're kind of borrowing from the same source. But if we reach the same conclusion via different avenues, it proves that we're actually right. I thought, actually, that is true. So, and yeah, I mean, and his work and many people like him and like me, it takes a lot of courage to get out there and do the work and ask awkward questions and then get your ego out of the equation, because that's the hard part. You got to remove yourself from the equation and just observe. And I tell you, the more you observe like a child, the more fun you have, because the answers become self-evident and they come at you faster than you can even write them down. And that's when you realize that you're having an intimate conversation with an invisible world that has a very mischievous sense of humor, but they also are very keen to help you understand the big picture. And that's why we're really here.
Man, it's so crazy that the world we live in is just like, it's so like, you're in your field. That's your field. You study it. You never look at anything else.
But, I know it's sad, isn't it?
But do you notice a trend, like ever since say 2012 was the start of the transition? Do you notice a trend of more and more people like becoming more aware of stuff like this, or is it kind of steady? Or
it's a bit of both. In fact, I was reading an article. It talked about the problem with kids today, and they're paying no attention. They have no manners. They're totally, looking at things which have no value in life. And that was written in 300 BC in Greece. I tell you, nothing changes in human nature. We go through cycles, as I said before. But I am very encouraged by when I travel around the world by what I see, because, like I said, good news doesn't often get reported in the media. And people often ask me, you must have a lot of people in California that believe this stuff. I said, yeah, but not half as many as the ones in Ohio. And you'd never think of sleepy, rural, little conservative Ohio as being a hotbed of new age metaphysical thinking. And I tell you, I've spoken in towns filled with a room filled with people, 100, 150, 200 people that come out of the woodwork to hear this stuff. And I'm thinking, my God, there's more of us than there are of them. It's like the recent election. There's a minority that's got control of the majority. And this is happening in a lot of places around the world right now, which is very worrying. But at the same time, it's good to know that we're actually in the majority. It's just it's only when you go out to conferences that you recognize there's so many of us. And by the same token, people are becoming more stupid as well. There's a huge disparity between inquiring minds who are becoming more inquiring and more interested and more open about and cross-pollinating ideas, which is where you get the real truth from. I mean, sometimes by understanding, hyperdimensional physics mixed with geology, you understand crop circles. I mean, who would have thought? I thought you had to understand agrarian stuff to understand how plants work, but no. You have to see things from multiple points of view. And at the same time, you have a lot of those people walking around now. And you have people who are completely, dumb as a brick and walking into fountains, looking at their cell phones all the time. I mean, it's quite scary. But once you recognize that this has been going on from generation to generation, it's actually quite comforting, So the trick is you've got to look after yourself. What are you doing to empower yourself, to become more aware and become a better person? And how can you show that to other people? How can you be the change you wish to see, as Gandhi said? And I think that's a very good way of doing it. Just be the example. Don't force it. Just do what is in your power. Be the change. Show people that there's a better way of doing things. And some will get it and some won't. And that's the way it's always been and the way it's always be. And I wouldn't worry about it.
And that's well put. That's kind of like how this podcast started, right? We kind of just we're very interested in this stuff. We're like, hey, I got the recording gear. see what happens. And then
exactly.
a year and a half later, here we are.
Earth is an experimental way station in the universe. We come here to have a collective conscious experience, absolutely, which is why we're part of this cycle now. We've been born now because we wanted to be here to see what was going to happen. But ultimately, it's about your experience as a soul. We're individual beings. We come here to have a personal experience, and that's what's important. How are you going to get through this experience that you don't remember what it was when you agreed to do it, which is part of the joke? You only find out when you die. The trick is just to do the best you can. Don't beat yourself up about it. Do the best you can and try to be a better person than when you arrived, and leave the place at least 1% better than when you found it. And that's the best you can do. So it's a very Zen way of looking at it. And those people were absolutely right.
So cool.
Braden, do you have something to say there?
Yeah, I just got a couple more.
He's in tears.
Yeah, my mind's getting blown back to back. It's hard to keep track.
Hey, no lawsuits.
Oh, never. A fan had asked, have you ever had any, has anyone ever made threats or stuff about your research for you to like discontinue what you're looking into?
They haven't, usually because I sort of, I guess I don't take myself too seriously. I'm very serious about my work, but I always like to sort of portray myself in public as someone with a bit of a sort of carefree attitude. So they think, oh, he's not that serious. He's a bit of a clown. And that allows me to get away with murder, metaphorically speaking. Some other researchers have not been so lucky. They have been hounded quite a bit. I just found a different way of handling it. I learned from the Templars. You basically learn to behave like an idiot and they leave you alone. You basically live to survive, to get on with your work unaccustomed. But I did have my phone bugged for quite a long time. And this is in the days when, everybody had landlines, not too long ago. And you'd always hear that click on the end of the line, and people would give me bullshit over the phone. And I'd be talking to physicists, mathematicians, farmers, and they'd give me the most ridiculous wrong information. In fact, there's one famous case where a friend of mine called me up after he'd sent me the real information, by the way, in an envelope through the mail, which is why we should never get rid of real mail. It's not trackable. And he told me there was going to be a good chance of having a crop circle on a specific field. He gave me the coordinates, and we actually found it there. But before that happened, he talked about it on the phone, gave me the wrong coordinates, and I swear we went on this hill and we saw several people from the British military dressed in camouflage, which is not that convincing, hiding around the perimeter of a field. We told them to go and look out, and we're shouting at them from the hill going, "You got the wrong field." And they're waving at us going, "Shut up." It was almost like a comedy. But no, I mean, I didn't get threats per se, but I was definitely monitored, because the funny thing is that we were way ahead of the authorities, always have been, because our heart was in the right place. We're not into control, and anybody that's trying to control this phenomenon has not fared that well. The people who have made the most progress have always been people who've had an open mind, a very sort of welcoming attitude, and working in a non-threatening manner. So, and I think looking back on it now, that was actually a very good approach to take, because it served us very well.
Very cool that no one's threatened to kill you or anything like that. That's for sure. That's
of course. Now I've told you I have to kill you.
Yeah. I had a question about so. Is it just in crops these formations happen, or does it ever happen on like solid surfaces like soil or rock or snow, or is it mainly crops because it's organic?
It's happened in snow and ice, but where they're the same thing, we don't know. There's never been a way to really measure it, or at least we haven't been able to until, because getting there, by the time we get there, everything was melted.
Right.
We do know that the connection was that if it ever happened in ice, or in snow, if someone was there to collect a sample, we could actually test the sample and find that, yes, in the genuine crop circles, whenever we've buried vials of water in them, it turns out that the water is coded 136% above normal water samples. That's one way we could have done it, but no one ever was able to collect the sample, so we're none the wiser. But usually there's just cereal crop. But they happen in weird cereal crop. I mean, apart from wheat and barley, there's canola, which is very, very brittle. So if you try to step on it, as I once showed a member of the police, because they were very skeptical, I said, try stepping with your big, thick Dr. Martens boots on that stalk. And they did. They snapped it. I thought, wow. Now, look at what's down over there. That's not snapped. That stuff has been bent over, like it's been made molten, like a huge amount of heat has been applied in a fraction of a second, which actually is what happens. It happens in 1 nanosecond. This heat that's a byproduct of the sound frequency boils the water inside the plant stem, and it makes the plant supple enough to fall over like molten glass, and then it rehardens in its horizontal position. It's beautiful. But the plant is not damaged, which is extraordinary. So we found that this does happen to very brittle plants like canola, and also Canadian corn, which has to be treated chemically to withstand those horrible prairie winds. So when that happens in Canadian corn, it's a magic sight. If you ever picked corn from a field, you'll know how really brittle and hard those stalks are. So when you see these things flattened like a pancake, completely steamed into place, it's a very beautiful sight. I've also seen them in linseed oil, which from the air looks like this beautiful mauve pattern, like someone dropped LSD on the land or something. Potatoes, the tops of trees in Wisconsin were swirled around in a perfect spiral as well. So yeah, they do have kind of a wide canvas, but again, they never damage anything when they do.
And that's crazy in corn, because corn is like a giant plant. Like it's like you'd have to it's hard to break one of those, and to break if you're doing some of these crop circles are like 700 feet wide, and like 100 circles in them.
You go to Kansas. Yeah, you go to Kansas and you see the stems are perfectly steamed into place, completely undamaged, which explains why one township in Kansas, which is a great story actually now that I remember about it, it's like a population of 100 people in the middle of nowhere. And in fact, I couldn't even pinpoint it on a map. And turns out that one afternoon there's a big crop circle there, and people were very excited. And suddenly, out of nowhere, there's this convoy of black 4x4s, all government vehicles. They show up with these tractor trailers with mulchers. They put crime scene tape around the thing. They brought their guns out, told the people to go back in their homes. They literally vacuumed the entire field of where the crop circle was. There was not one trace left of anything. I mean, they almost took out the topsoil if they could. And they disappeared as quickly as they arrived. And you wonder, wow, and this is supposed to be made by people. Why are they so afraid?
Yeah.
It's straight out of X-Men. It's a real story as well.
You get a lot of those reports of the black military vehicles and type of UFO phenomenon or anything like that to show up immediately after and question people or confiscate cameras.
Yeah. They don't have much of a sense of humor.
No.
I don't like them.
No. Yeah.
There was one time when we were on the side of a hill in bright daylight, and there's a lot of eyewitnesses that talk about the balls of light or the orbs making the crop circles, or they're in the vicinity of them before and after. And there was one time when I actually saw them at night, and they're very brightly colored. I mean, you'll never forget it. They're about the size of a beach ball. You can communicate with them. They move about at will, but if you ask them to stop, they'll stop. They can read your mind. And they have a mischievous sense of humor. Sometimes they'll sort of fly over your car and stop your engine. It's just like Close Encounters. I mean, it's so funny. But in the daytime, they look like brightly colored silver spheres. And we're having a sandwich on the side of this hill in England, bright daylight, and just happened to have a camcorder handy and saw one of these big sort of orbs flying, I want to say, a quarter of a mile in front of us. So we're about 120 feet up on the hill, cornfield underneath, and it just stops. And we're saying, oh, look, it's one of them. And it starts sort of moving around in a little circle, like it's waving at us. And there's a black military helicopter close behind. And I thought, keep filming this. This is going to be fun. And it's like you can hear the actual ball of light talking to you going, hey, watch this. Watch what I'm going to do. And suddenly it would disappear and it would reappear behind the helicopter. So the helicopter has to turn around. Then it disappears and it goes above the helicopter. So the helicopter's going, well, what the hell did it go? And you can see the pilot having a really hard time. And it bends the craft up and it tries to sort of obviously take some pictures. And then it disappears again and it appears under the helicopter. Now the helicopter has no idea where the ball of light is. And then you almost, again, you hear it saying, well, that was fun. I hope you enjoy that. And then it stops. It wobbles for a fraction of a second, and then it shoots off at such a ludicrous speed that we can't even keep up with it. And I thought, wow, that was really impressive. The helicopter just sort of sailed back to the military base, which is not far from the house where I lived. And I ran down the hill with the group of people. So there's 4 eyewitnesses to this, including the person that filmed this. And I said, let's get down to that house. I know who lives there. They've got a television. I need to see this on a big screen. And we were there watching this, and we're going, my God, this is amazing. Who do we give this to? And no sooner we said that, 15 minutes into this, there's a knock on the door. 15 minutes. I open the door. There's British police, and they're very nice. And they said they're very polite, and they said, "We're not here. We're not asking you to hand us over the tape you filmed, and you don't want to know how we found you." And I said, "Absolutely. I have no idea why I'm answering the door. Oh, and by the way, you did not make a copy of this what, in 15 minutes? Are you kidding? Okay, goodbye. Have a nice day." So they're very nice. And meanwhile, we've already made a copy.
Nice.
And we sent it around, and God knows where it ended up. Oh, it ended up in a video called Crop Circle Communique. So if you still have a video player and eBay, those two will go together quite well. So again, another great story from the days of Crop Circle research. So there was a bit of humor that was attached to it.
That's funny. Okay, well,
now,
go for
do you still find out about new ones as rare as they are now? Do you get calls about them?
I keep track of it on the periphery. I mean, my work is really involved into the area of where the crop circles left off, which is the connection to sacred sites. And then I went off to Knights Templar, which actually is very linked to all of this, by the way. And then the whole concept of why some temples there's no one buried in them, like the Great Pyramid and stuff like that. Why there are these sarcophagi that are sealed, there's no one inside. And so that was another interesting project. But I keep a peripheral interest in it. I still have my people on the ground that will report back to me, because I get emails all the time saying, I was just in this, I hope it's real. I said, well, I hate to bust your cloud on this, but actually it's not. But if you're picking up some energy, there was a real one in that field a few years ago, so that's probably what you're picking up. So yeah, I'm still in the periphery of it, but I feel that my work was done. And you know what, in 15 years later, after the book was published, nothing new has really appeared to advance our understanding. It's like we just nailed it, and now we just have to basically work with what we have and apply it.
So do you know how many like real ones are there a year? Do you have any idea, or do you know people who have any idea? Or?
I'd say at the most about 2 a year since 2003 are real. And they usually tend to be the very simple ones, the ones that don't attract attention. And the reason is because there's so much frivolous attention being given to them, so much tourism. There's a lot of negativity as well. People go in there and fight about them. And when you're dealing with an energy form that's very pure, you don't want to pollute that. It will basically undermine the whole reason why they're appearing. And that's why I think the real ones nowadays, the rare ones that exist, are very simple. No one pays any attention to them, leave them alone, because we've become so acclimated as humans to looking for the big stuff. It's kind of like to Egypt, to the Giza Plateau, and everybody goes to the Great Pyramid. Everybody forgets there's 2 other pyramids, and the little one is actually the most interesting one. No one ever goes there. And the big secret to Giza is the little pyramid. And that tells you a lot about human nature. It's a huge lesson. So, and that, again, applied to crop circles makes a lot of sense as well. Again, they said that it was part of a conversation. They had a beginning and an end, and they would give the information. This is channel material 20 years ago that I'm repeating now. Mm-hmm. They said that we have to think about it, work on it. Some scientists would be, in quotes, used to create energy devices. We now know that's happened. We know that there will be healing modalities developed from it. That has happened. And the ultimate aim was twofold. It was to buy humanity time to get its act together before the coming changes, which are already upon us, come to take place. We should prepare ourselves and do whatever is necessary. And secondly, it's about helping humanity evolve as a consciousness. And many people have been touched by this phenomenon, and I've seen them become much better people. They've gone on to influence local governments. Some people even within government, believe it or not, have taken a liking to this subject, and they've applied what they've learned within the sphere of their influence. So there are people in the right places doing the right things based on the information that's been encoded into the Earth. So I wouldn't lose heart about whether it's real or not, or whether the fact that it's really stopped happening 15 years ago. The fact is that it's here, the energy is here, the imprint of the information is here, and we should work on that information and apply it.
Right on. Okay, now let's get to the title of the show is Alien Theorists Theorizing. So you've talked about the Watchers from ancient Egypt. Do you think so? Who like you see these orb UFOs? What is that interdimensional being, or is that like you said beings from a higher density, like higher frequency, or what exactly do you think that is?
Yeah, they're basically saying that they're physical on their level of reality as we are on ours. It's just that we cannot even begin to conceptualize them as real beings because we have no method of understanding a frequency that's that high. And it's not better than ours. They're just different. We're just very limited beings, that's all. And that's how they try to explain it. And whenever you see these balls of light flying around the fields, basically that's consciousness. It'll be like you and me taking our consciousness, taking it out of body, and traveling to another world that's even denser than ours. We would appear to them as balls of light. That's how it happens. And that's why these balls of light are usually associated with fairy phenomena, for example, or supernatural beings in every culture around the world. But these people, these ancient cultures, have complete respect for them because they understand what they are. They're spirit forms that are showing themselves to us in a way that we can see it, but yet they cannot actually physicalize on our level of reality. So actually, it fulfills two purposes. It shows that they can actually move about at will, and they have control of the laws of nature. And also they can show to us that there's other levels of reality around us, and we should take heed of that and do a better job of communicating and also respecting the world we live in, because what we do down here has repercussions outside the Earth as well. We're all one big ball of energy in the universe. What we do down here affects everything and everyone. So that's why they have a vested interest in our well-being. And UFOs basically also have their particular level of reality. They come from other planets like ours. They're physical, but they are essentially people just like us who are able to master the laws of the universe and use wormholes, the magnetic portals that we are just now beginning to realize exist between the planets. And they found a way to basically get from A to B across light space and be here in no time at all. And there's all kinds of aliens out there who have all kinds of different agendas. Most of them are pretty good. Some of them not so good. I've been in enough UFO conferences to talk to people who've been abducted, and a lot of the abduction cases are actually quite positive. In fact, it seems to be that there's a cooperation going on between the individual and the abductor, even at a subconscious level. And these people have the most extraordinary experiences. But then there are those who tend to have the negative experiences, which are usually associated with the grays. And I always wondered that perhaps they are gray because I don't think they're actually up in a world of their own. I think they're in between worlds. I think the color says it all. And they're very curious, it seems, as to how we as humans work. They cannot understand emotions. They can't understand things like love and empathy. And they're trying to basically take out parts of our bodies to try and understand, is that where it is? So it's like us experimenting on a guinea pig, no different when you think about it. And those are the ones that tend to be a bit more severe. And I've seen enough people at these conferences to know who's bullshitting and who's telling the truth. And I tell you, people like Travis Walton, for example, I've looked in his eyes, and I know fear, real fear, and that guy has been through something. He's not faking it.
Oh, that's cool.
So again, the universe is so much wider than we tend to constrict our understanding. We just have to realize that there are as many alien people and as many supernatural forms out there as there are people on Earth.
Man, that is cool, because I've always thought, and we've always talked about on the show, as if humans are ever going to get to space and become interstellar, let's say, the amount of like collaboration, and like you can't do that as like a warfaring species. You got to be like, everyone's got to be on the same page. Like if like, okay, we want to do this, everyone works together for that means. So when you say like, oh, that's mainly peaceful, that makes sense to me. But then
exactly,
and then even the grays, like if they're not necessarily peaceful, they're not necessarily like malicious. They're just curious and they can't understand our reality, kind of thing. Is what you're saying?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, if we do that to chickens and mice in laboratories, why can't they do it to us? I mean, all things being equal, it's actually quite fair. I mean, look at what we did to the alien autopsy in the film. I mean, the guy was dead, fair enough, but still, I wonder if we ever caught one of them alive, what would we do to them if they were still alive? That would be horrible. And in fact, that film actually brings up an interesting story, because that was supposed to be, and I'm sure many people are familiar with the Alien Autopsy film that came out about, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think so.
Apparently, one of the aliens that survived the crash landing at Roswell, well, the Hopi, who you don't get to hear much about, or was it the Navajo? It was the Navajo, beg your pardon. They actually came out and they tried to actually stop that from being screened. And they said, and I quote, it's not the fact that you're screening this that upsets us. It's the fact that you, A, are screening the wrong crash. It's another crash altogether, which is an extraordinary thing to say. And B, that's one of our people. That's family to us. You don't do that to dead people. You should have some respect, and show some respect to others. And I thought that was an incredible thing to say on two accounts.
Man, This is one of our coolest fucking interviews we ever had by far. This is so cool. Braden,
I expect sales to go through the roof, or else.
Oh, don't you worry. We're gonna push your books like no other. But we're about an hour and a half here, so we'll probably start to wrap it up. Braden, you got any further questions?
No, I had lists. I had 3 pages of questions, and before I even asked them, you would almost answer them in order I was going to ask
it's them. Like he's reading our mind.
Yeah.
It does give you, actually, I mean, I'm not boasting here, and just give you an idea of what this stuff can do. It really makes you realize that you are a god. You begin to develop parts of your being that you were told did not exist, kind of like the church. And I've seen this in myself and other people. And that's just not just with crop circles. I'm talking about working with ancient sacred sites and temples. That's what they were built to do. And if someone had told me this, actually they did tell me this 20 years ago, that I'll be able to see energy lines, I'll be able to be much more clairvoyant, much more empathic. I laughed at them, and now I am not laughing because it really has happened to me and the people around me. So there is a bit of truth to what you just said, actually, and it's actually kind of funny at the same time. So I encourage you to go out there and just get out and go and visit the sacred places and just hang out with them. It'll be amazing what they do to you.
We're on the quest. We're on the start of our journey. Definitely.
Good for you.
Well, let's wrap this up. And you heard it here first. If you see a spade, call it a spade. If you see a duck, call it a duck. If you don't know what it is, you don't know what it is.
Boom.
That's fair enough.
That's so cool, man. Hey, Freddy, thank you very much for coming on. Give a couple plugs for yourself. Where can people find your book, and where can they get a hold of you?
Invisibletemple.com, and you'll be there for days. And good luck to you.
Yeah, I've been on your website. You got tons of stuff on there. You got a lot of DVDs, a lot of books to read. I'm gonna be busy this summer.
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing like a good book. You can't read. By the way, they did experiments and find out that if you actually read stuff on Kindle and all of those mechanical things, you only retain about 30% of the information. And I said this years ago, and even today when I try to read something on a computer, I don't remember half the stuff that I read. I actually have to have a real book, and it really does make a huge difference, oddly enough. So hopefully they'll never vanish.
You know what? I don't think they will. I think there's always, it's just like there's a market for everything. It disappears for a while, and then people realize what they missed, and it always comes back.
Hey, records made a comeback. Yeah,
exactly. Spin that black circle, like Pearl Jam said.
Yeah, the sound of vinyl is a one of a kind. You can't reproduce it digitally. That's for sure.
Exactly. Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey, thank you very much, Freddy. We'll be in touch soon. Maybe we can get you back on and talk about more about sacred sites and that kind of stuff. But
absolutely,
we'll let you go for now. And we really appreciate you coming on, and we will push your message to everyone we can.
Cheers, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Freddy. Appreciate it.
Wow.
Wow is right. What the fuck just happened? That was amazing.
Dude, I feel like I became more of a god just talking to that guy.
Honestly, there was points when he was talking, I was just like getting shivers. Like, you know what? All he's saying, like all the stuff I've been reading for the last couple of years, is just like all this like lining up in a straight line, like all connecting its own dots, pretty much.
Oh man,
that was fucking cool.
he was so fun to listen to. Like,
yeah,
honestly,
he was great. He was fucking awesome.
So fun to listen to. Holy, that was such a good podcast. Wow.
I just sat there and listened for most of the time because, like,
can we get more guests like him on?
Well, he was like honestly, someone sent me his book, and they're like, "Man, you got to read this." Actually, a few people sent it, and I was like, "Okay." I didn't read it. But I listened to his lectures because I was going to read it, but then I messaged him thinking I could get him on maybe in like a month or two. He was like, "I'd love to come on. I'll come on next Tuesday." I was like, "Oh shit! I only got 4 days to prepare." Yeah, it was fucking. It's crazy. Like he just came on so quick. It was so fucking cool. Man, that was fucking sweet.
It was actually mind blowing. Like to listen to that and that like, oh dude, like can you email him again? Just thanking him. We should send him a fucking T-shirt. Let's get him on because I want to do it. I want to do a trilogy with him.
A 3-parter, okay? Yeah.
I want to do the next one on sacred temples.
Like sacred sites around the world in the
sacred sites,
yeah, and then reference to like sacred geometry and shit.
Yeah, and then I want to finish it up with Knights Templar.
Ooh, I like it.
I want to do a story arc with Mr. Freddy Silva, if we can.
Yeah,
hopefully he'll come back on.
Hey, you know what? It seemed like he had a good time. He was laughing, having a good time. We were letting him do his thing, and like I was just fucking mesmerized really when he was talking.
Me too. It was so good. So, anyway, we gotta wrap this one?
We gotta wrap this up. Man, go to his website. Fuck, what was it called? Shit, what did he just say?
Inside. Fuck.
Oh, it's gonna come to me. It's gonna come to me in a second. Motherfucker, what was it called?
I was looking at it earlier today too.
Oh, 1 second, Freddy.
InvisibleTemple.com.
InvisibleTemple.com. Go look at all his shit. Read his books. Support the man. He's fucking been doing it service. He's definitely not. He's not a superstar. He is not super rich. He puts out his books. He has a good time. He travels the world. He deserves a little credit. Deserves a little support.
Wow. You know what? Zelly, you know what me and you should try to do?
What's that?
Let's try to go to one of his lectures.
I would love to. That'd be so
I wonder
fun.
where they are.
It's on his
tour date.
It's on his website. I'm sure we can find one.
All right, hold on. Let me see. Let's see if there's
anything close.
Yeah.
Man,
Portland, Oregon. Oh, that's April 21st. Oh, that's
last year or this year, but before.
Yeah.
I'm sure he has like a bunch every year, like probably like one a month or something. What do you got?
Oh, motherfucker.
Hi.
Oh.
Where was it?
I don't even want to tell you because of the date. I know I can't go.
Oh, because is it in Vancouver?
No, it's in Seattle. But I have a wedding to go to that day.
What's the date?
The 21st of October.
Oh, I could do that probably too. Yeah, well, one time we'll go. Anyways, let's wrap this one up. If you want to hear a little more, we're gonna go after hours here for our Patreons. Follow us on Twitter at Truth is Out There, THURR, at Alien Theorists on Facebook.
If you're listening this far, you know where to find us.
At Alien Theorists, just type it in anywhere. We pop right up. Any podcast player, any fucking search, you find us.
Your boys come up.
We come up.
Anyways, not as always, as my new saying, live long and prolapse.
You know what? As this episode was...
Oh,
you are the universe experiencing yourself is pretty much what he just told you. So, fuck yeah. Keep those eyes on the skies. Let's get out of here.
Baseball fans, BetMGM is giving you the chance to win a prize every day during the baseball season. Step into the batter's box for BetMGM Swing for the Fences free-to-play game. Pick any area of the strike zone and take your best swing. If you get a single, double, triple, or home run, you'll receive a prize. Smash a home run to collect a bonus bet on us. Just log into your BetMGM Sports account to get started. Then visit your promotions section to access the Swing for the Fences free-to-play game. You'll score a prize if you hit a single, double, triple, or home run. There's nothing more exciting than going yard. So swing for the fences with the king of sportsbooks. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. Existing customer offers. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards vary depending on market and expire 24 hours from issuance. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.